What's up everybody, Gaming Island here, and today we're doing top 5 Twilight Princess dungeons. Quite a specific top 10, but I've decided rather than make one big top 10 Legend of Zelda dungeons, I'll break it up by each game. Once I've done most of the games, I'll make a complete top 10. The first of the series will be of Twilight Princess. Twilight Princess contains 9 dungeons, however, the final 2 have no item to obtain. Despite this, I will still be including them. Twilight Princess, unlike its predecessor The Wind Waker, actually had a lot of good dungeons, so making this list was hard, but I was able to pick out my choices and finalize a list. Anyway, let's get this list started. At number 5, we have the Lakebed Temple. This dungeon is a lot of fun despite the fact that it's a water dungeon. This is also the point of the game where the dungeons get a lot harder. And besides, I need to give credit to this temple for actually pulling off a good water dungeon, unlike past water dungeons. I'm looking at you, Ocarina of Time. At parts, however, I found it a bit too aggravating and frustrating, especially in the area where you get the big key. The mini-boss I also feel is a lot like Goma from Ocarina of Time. I love the dungeon item, which is the claw shot. This thing is probably the best item in the game, especially when you add another claw shot later in the game, only second to the spinner. Morphle as a boss is a bit lackluster and is way too easy. He barely even attacks, so I feel like I'm killing a harmless creature. However, parts of the dungeon make you feel really smart, and some of the rooms are super fun. Also, the dungeon utilizes a lot of items. Water Bomb, Zora Armor, and Iron Boots, as well as later in the dungeon, the Claw Shot. A pretty good dungeon, especially for being a water dungeon. This dungeon has probably one of the best boss fights in the game, if not the best, Arbiter's Grounds. This dungeon is located in Gerudo Desert and is where you find the first Mirror of Twilight Shard. Located inside of a cave, which used to be the prison for the worst criminals of Hyrule, it has now been run over. This is the first dungeon to use Wolf Link and Human Link, and it uses it fairly well. At the beginning, 4 posts take away the fire from 4 separate candles, which work as a way to open up a door. You use Wolf Link to track down the scent and restore the candles and open up the door. After a short mini-boss fight with Deathblade, you obtain the spinner, one of the coolest items in all of Zelda history. However, it is sorely underutilized outside of the dungeon, but for the time in the dungeon, it is extremely fun. We have a fight with Twilight Fossil Stallard, which is a significant departure from the previously boss fights, all which have been pretty lackluster. The fight utilizes the spinner in an amazing way. You need to snap Stallard's spine with the spinner. In the second phase, you need to spin on a cylinder and jump from wall to wall trying to catch up with Stallard. It's an amazing dungeon, however, at times I was kind of bored, and one of the biggest problems with the dungeon is that at times it looks the same, and which can easily get you lost. However, because of the excellent item, dungeon, boss, and Wolf Link usage, Arbiter's Ground has earned the number 4 spot. The second dungeon in the game belongs at number 3, and that dungeon is the Goron Mines located on Death Mountain. This was the first dungeon I liked along the game. The previous dungeon before was okay, but not amazing. But when I played this dungeon, I loved it. It was fun assembling the boss key from the 3 separate Elder Gorons. I like the setting as well as the industrial look to it. Your goal is to rescue Goron tribe leader Darius, who has been possessed by one of the few shadows. The lead up to the dungeon is also cool. You must prove your worth to the Gorons by sumo wrestling. Okay. Anyway, once inside, there are 3 Goron elders you must find who will give you the parts of the boss key. Before the dungeon begins, you must obtain the Iron Boots, which are utilized well and creatively by giving you the ability to walk on walls through magnetism. After defeating Dangoro, you obtain the item of the dungeon, which is the bow. Equipped with the bow, you move farther into the dungeon until you face off against the boss of the dungeon, Darius, who was a mediocre boss as I stated before we're talking about Stallard. I was able to figure out how to beat him way too quickly and only took 1 heart of damage throughout the entire fight. Another problem with the fight is that Darius' form, while possessed, is just way too generic. However, the fight does use the Iron Boots well. You shoot Virus, that's the name he has while possessed, in the head, stunning him. Then you grab the chains that are attached to his feet and pull them. This trips him over, and then you slash away. The dungeon is also a bit straightforward and easy, but then again, it is the second dungeon in the game. The setting of Snow Peak Ruins is just escalated by the creepy and depressing atmosphere only elevated by the music. Don't be fooled, this is one of the best, if not the best, ice dungeon you will ever play. We have some pretty good setup. We just learned that the Mirror of Twilight has actually been split up into 4 separate shards. This means we must go up to Mount Snow Peak. However, because of the snow environment, we must learn the scent of a beast we must track down and follow. We do this by catching a fish. We meet Yedo, and we snowboard to his house to help his sick wife, which is extremely fun. This is where things get interesting. They possess one of the shards, but they locked it up in their bedroom because it made his wife Yeda sick. Yeda gives you the dungeon map and points to where you need to go, and opens up part of the dungeon for exploration. Turns out she pointed us to a piece of pumpkin. She realizes her mistake and points in a different direction. While searching for the chest, we receive the item of the dungeon, the ball and chain, after a fairly fun mini-boss fight involving the claw shot against Darkhammer. The ball and chain, like the spinner and Dominion Rod, is just as underutilized as the other 2 outside its respective dungeon. However, this item isn't even fun to use. Anyway, it turns out she pointed us to cheese. The final time we get the key. What I really love about this dungeon is the gothic rundown mansion setting, as well as the interior. It does limit your exploration at the beginning, but I like that as it makes the dungeon progression more streamlined. Not linear, but streamlined. It is interesting to have to explore. A lot of the enemies are really creative and interesting. Also, I have to comment that the dungeon theme is awesome. The canon puzzles were also cool and interesting, but not too hard. Now the 2 major flaws. The first, the ice block puzzle. Nothing more needs to be said. They suck, and you know it. The second major flaw, and is the main culprit for the reason why Snow Peak Ruins is at number 2, and at number 1. The boss is just terrible. Bozetta is way too easy for a boss this far into the game. At the 5th dungeon, all you basically need to do is swing your ball and chain. That's it. The visuals and the music is amazing for the boss, but it falls so short for not needing any strategy to defeat it. This is the one big shortcoming of the Snow Peak Ruins and its boss fight. My favorite dungeon in the entirety of Twilight Princess is not the dungeon you would expect. The Palace of Twilight is by far the best dungeon in the game. And I don't like this place because of the atmosphere. Yeah, sure, it adds to it, it makes it better, but that's not the reason this dungeon is here on the list. It's here because of the dungeon layout and design. This dungeon is reached after collecting the 4 shards of Mirrored Twilight, which when assembled take you to the Palace of Twilight, which is where Zant resides after usurping the royal family. In order to progress, you must restore the 2 souls, as in, the souls act as the Twilight Realm's sun, and so when restored, will bring back the Twilight to their original form, as well as power up the Master Sword. The soul mechanic is why I love this dungeon. The layout works where there's a de facto circle, which acts as the center. On the left and right side will be entrances to long hallways, where at the end resides the soul. When you reach the soul, you fight a hologram Zant and grab the soul. Doing this activates these hands similar to Wall Masters, except worse. They are known as Zant's hand. Instead of going after you, they go after the soul. What's so suspenseful about these moments is that at points you must put the soul down and go somewhere to activate some stairs. Leaving the soul alone means that the hand can get it. This means you need to rush, which then leads to screw-ups. What makes these moments even worse is the creepy and scary music as the hand gets closer towards the soul, which is just to freak you out. You do this twice, which is incredibly fun but tense and suspenseful. I'd actually be interested in an entire game centered around this concept. You progress further into the dungeon until you face off against Zant. I won't go into the cutscene as I don't want to spoil it, so I'll talk about the boss fight, which is a 6-phase fight. While it does feel kind of lazy on the designer side, as 5 of the 6 stages are just rehashes of recent boss fights but easier, it's still fairly fun to replay these boss fights but with a different spin on them. The final phase is a sword duel with Zant. While not my favorite boss fight, still a pretty amazing one as well as epic. Now when I first started playing the dungeon, I was not looking forward to it, as I did not have good memories with the Twilight Realm. I did not particularly love Wolfling form. However, when playing this dungeon, it made me realize it wasn't the Twilight Realm I despised, it was Wolfling. I know I stated previously how Arbiter's Ground used Wolfling form, and yeah, I like Wolfling form at those times. I didn't like it when it was mandatory to play as Wolfling. The dungeon showed that I actually enjoy and love the Twilight Realm and its digital vibe, music, and just downright creepy but gorgeous atmosphere. The bloom lighting is amazing as well as the enemies. This dungeon made me enjoy the Twilight Realm, and I applaud it for that. I know some of you may not agree with me, but this is my list. If you don't like it, make your own. I'd love to see your opinions. But in my mind, the Palace of Twilight is by far the best dungeon of Twilight Princess in its entirety. Anyway guys, this has been Gaming Island, and I'll see you guys next time. Oh yeah guys, and watch out for an update video coming out December 1st, which will make major changes to this YouTube channel.